Welcome, everyone, to a new edition of Draft on Tap with Danny Shimon. I'm going to bring him on quickly. I just want to let you know that tomorrow we've got two shows, Crosstalk. I'm going to start talking about spring training. Yes, it's baseball season. It felt like baseball season a couple of days ago in Chicago when it was in the 70s, and then it felt like football season. It snowed the next day. And then after that, what do we got? What? There's a show tomorrow afternoon, and I'm forgetting what it is tomorrow evening. Oh, it's the Willis Twin Towers, and they'll start at 5:30, and they'll take you through their thoughts on the NFL Combine. And if you're a fan of Richard Lewis, the comedian who recently passed away, he is going to be eulogized by Mike North and Joe Mandel on Saturday. So look for that. Best way to stay on top of things, of course, is to subscribe to our Barroom Network channel or get your audio podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Barroom Network will stream to your devices. All right. With that, let me welcome in Danny Shimon. Danny, how are you, my friend?
Hey, although I am tired. I've been going through tape.
Screwing? You've been screwing?
I've been pouring through all these tapes of defensive players, defensive ends. Obviously, today the combine kicked off. I haven't had a chance to see all of the results, but some of them did scroll through on Twitter. I did see some of those. So we'll obviously have the guest today to talk about them. Jordan will jump on today, and we'll have a discussion with the defensive ends and edge players for the Bears. Scout those guys for tonight's show. But this is the time of the year where everything starts ramping up now. Obviously, rumors going out and in terms of what's going to happen at the top of the draft, and with player acquisition and all that, so on and so forth. So it's a busy time of the year, but it's also the best time of the year. So
it really is.
Plus, the Bears are more popular and more entertaining in the offseason than they are during the season. So
that's been true for a few years now. Absolutely. Yeah. And as Danny said, in just a few minutes, we'll bring in Jordan Silvera of the Barroom Network. He is going to talk pass rushers with us because that is the main focus of today's show, pass rushers. And there's a ton of them to look at. So we'll talk about that briefly. But there was some news that just broke a little while ago on the Football Night in Chicago show that I want to get Danny's thoughts on. This is Josh Rock talking with David Hall about news regarding Justin Fields' trade value and that it may not be what some people have thought it was going to be.
Multiple league sources did tell me the Falcons did make a preliminary call to check in on Fields and what a possible compensation package might look like. David, I think what the Bears are going to find with Justin is that there are very few teams that are going to be interested, and that the compensation might end up being a lot less than has been initially reported. I think we might be looking at, a third-round pick and maybe a fifth, or you get a conditional third with that goes up to a 2 with playtime numbers.
I think there might be some validity to this, Danny, because there are so many quarterbacks coming out. And so if the Bears are trying to hold a team, hostage, like for the number one overall pick and get tons of picks, they may not, other teams may not be agreeable to that. And the same thing with Justin Fields, because there's so many potential good quarterbacks in this draft. And we've got some free agents that could be low cost rentals like a Kirk Cousins, and Russell Wilson is going to cost next to nothing wherever he plays in 2024. What are your thoughts about Justin Fields' trade value based on what you heard there?
All right, I got a lot of thoughts. First of all, Kirk Cousins is not going to be low cost. He's going to be 40-some million guaranteed probably a year. So Kirk Cousins Russell Wilson will be a low cost veteran. Yes, I agree with you there. But first of all, like we've said, Greg has said it multiple times, this is a lying season. And the first thing I think I want to hear that report is this is the team, whether it's the Falcons or whoever, the NFL, that is trying to use the media to kind of, say, hey, Ryan Poles, you're asking for way too much here for Justin Fields. This is what you're going to get. Now, you and I were talking, Aldo, prior to the show, where I had someone who works for the NFL who told me that if Poles is astute, he would take a third round pick or a fourth round pick this year, and then next year's pick make it a second round pick with conditions, right? Similar to the conditions that, for example, the Packers had with the Jets, right? If Aaron Rodgers played a certain amount of snaps or whatever it was, the incentives there, that would become a first round pick. The Jets would pack a first round pick. Well, Aaron got hurt, or 4 snaps into the series, so that Packers were able to, or Jets were able to keep their first round pick. So similar to its package here, the guy told me that if he gets a 3rd or 4th round pick this year, and then next year gets a 2nd round pick with packages, incentives that based on Justin's performance, and if they make the playoffs and wins and all that stuff, could kick up into a possible 1st round pick. That could be a way to go. It might be, a 3rd round pick this year and a 3rd round pick next year with incentives to be a 2nd round pick. So who knows? But you can get creative with it. But the first thing I think of is there are, this is just one of the NFL teams trying to work through the media. But if I'm Ryan Poles, what I'm trying to do out there is I'm trying to draw as many people to the table as I can, whether it's, the Patriots, the Steelers, the Falcons, and I was talking earlier, although there's always a team that lurking out there that we just don't know, could be interested in Justin. Right. So, this is all, ploy and negotiation ploy, in my opinion. And I think if they come out of this trade for Justin with a 2nd and a 4th, I think that's a good return. If they come out with a 3rd and like I said, a conditional possible 2nd round next year, I could be a possible good return as well. So we'll see what happens. But at this point, I just take it all a grain of salt because there's a lot of things flying around at the JW Marriott in Indianapolis. So we just got to see what actually sticks to the wall and what comes to fruition.
It does feel, based on the reports coming out of the combine and, just overall speculation, that there is momentum for the Bears keeping the number 1 overall pick and drafting Caleb Williams. What's your gut sense of that?
Yeah, I think that's the way we've been leaning, right? We've been talking about it here since our week 1 of the draft on tap. I think in my opinion, with the way that they constructed this offensive staff, they brought in the installation, they brought in the extra, coaches to be able to take in a rookie quarterback and develop them. So my only question in terms of the first overall pick is, whether Caleb Williams would be able to, satisfy, the Bears and Poles and company in terms of his character issues. The questions that scouts had beginning of the year that I talked about openly here on our airs here, said that there's questions about this kid in terms of, he's more of a me versus we, a mentality and so on and so forth. Will they follow him, in terms of a third, men who have families and kids to feed? Will they follow this kid who thinks, he's already made, like, what is it, 10 to 12 million on NIL deals already, so this is a kid that has a lot of questions off the football field. So, I know he came out and made his first public statement on the record with Pete Thamel with ESPN and everything sounded perfect, right? Sounding what you want to hear, right? He's talking about he'll go play for wherever texts him. He talked about Chicago in terms of the icons here and Michael Jordan and Walter Payton, and I think he's playing to the audience, to the crowd. He's a smart kid, and I think that's all good and well and said and done. But he's got to go in there now and prove to Poles and Eberflus and the rest of that staff that he's a guy you can trust and he's a guy you can. But having said all that, if he comes through and says, hey, they believe him and they trust him. To me, it's Caleb Williams is got to be the first pick in the draft, and not that he doesn't have issues or warts or doesn't have things he has to work through, right? And I think I've seen reports today where some are saying Jaden Daniels could be the first off pick, and remember, I was the one that said that Jaden Daniels is going to go ahead of Drake May in our first show with our first guest, JP Acosta. And I told him, I said, I think Drake May was his top quarterback. I said, Jaden Daniels is going to go ahead of Drake May when this is all said and done. And Daniels has good tape. You watch Daniels' tape. I mean, he's got some stuff on tape. And it talked about, playing it within the structure of an offense. Talk about being in balance in the pocket and always being ready to throw the football. Daniels has that. He had elite weapons on the outside. He had, this tremendous season the last year. But that body frame, that really does concern me. And we'll see what he weighs in at. But even if he's at 205, he's just really, really thin. And I know he's done a good job of staying healthy in the SEC. And prior to that was Pac-12. But this is the NFL. And even guys like Justin Fields, who's 6'3", 230 pounds, hasn't played a full season yet, right? So if you're going to be a quarterback that runs. Now, Jaden doesn't have to run. He is just electric when he runs with the football. So that's a part of his game you don't want to take away, but you also have to coach him up. Having said all that, Caleb Williams, though, doesn't have the height that Jaden Daniels has, but he's got the ability to make those off-platform throws. The ability, his release is lightning quick. And what I've seen with Caleb that I haven't seen with any other quarterback so far that I've scouted is his ability when he puts a ball down and he tries to run out of the pocket and looking downfield, his ability to reload and get rid of that ball in a millisecond is elite. And that's the one trait that I like about him is he's got the elite quick release. He can make all the throws. Now he's also a guy that a lot of Caleb Williams, a lot of his play is outside broken plays, off platform stuff in terms of structure in the offense. He doesn't do a great job of being structured in the offense. Jaden Daniels has a leg up on him in that part in terms of playing through the offense, hitting timely throws. There's times you see I've sent you a couple clips, although where Caleb Williams takes a look at the guy at slant route wide open, doesn't throw it for a reason. Same things that we've been complaining about Justin doing here in the last couple of years. Doesn't throw it, looks off of him for whatever reason, and then takes off with the football. So he does a lot of stuff with the non-scripted stuff that he does well at. But all I'm saying is Caleb's talent, his ability, his release, his arm talent, ability to find that last second release valve in terms of receiver. That I think is in all the multiple seasons he had of success and for USC and then also going back to Oklahoma. Jane only had won that 1 year this past year where he won the Heisman Trophy. So I think if you're number one, you're gonna stick at number one. Don't overthink it. Go with Caleb Williams. I think that he's a consensus number one pick amongst 32 teams.
Well, before we turn our attention from the pass rushers who are going to be sacking quarterbacks potentially for the Chicago Bears, let me bring in Jordan to get his thoughts on anything that Danny said regarding the quarterback position. I know you must be disappointed he didn't bring up J.J. McCarthy.
Good evening, fellas. No, I know Danny's not the biggest fan of J.J. McCarthy. I actually thought, and it's certainly fine. We all like our different flavors of quarterbacks. I thought where I disagree with Danny most is I'm not the biggest Jaden Daniels fan. I would agree with you in some ways, Danny. I think he does play within the offense. It was a more pro-style offense than what Lincoln Riley ran. But I also saw a guy that was late on throws, didn't throw a lot over the middle. As soon as he felt a little bit of pressure, he'd take off running. And I heard you say something like, he doesn't need to run. And certainly I would agree he doesn't need to, but that's his favorite tool is that the moment that he finds that he feels a little bit of pressure, those eyes drop and he's looking to create and he's fantastic at it. But boy, does he take shots. And to your point, I know J.J. McCarthy, one of your flaws with J.J. is the size. Jaden Daniels, I have more concerns about that because the kid's 24, 25. There's not enough room to grow into that frame. J.J. McCarthy has a little bit of a leeway there, if you will. But I think that's where I would say I disagree. Drake May is my quarterback 1, and we can certainly talk to that. But Jaden Daniels is my quarterback 4 in this class.
Very good. All right, we'll talk about quarterbacks more on future shows. So we'll get both your thoughts on what has transpired there with your feelings. I want to get to the pass rusher situation. Now, I got to admit, I made a little bit of a mistake. Danny, when he puts his list together, are always players that he tries to find fits for in the Chicago Bears defense. And then when I asked Jordan to come up with his top 10 list, he said, well, I could do it this way or I could do it that way. And I said, do it however you want. And so Jordan has given us 2 different lists. One is an edge rusher and a 3-4 odd front, and one is the traditional 4-down lineman defensive end. So I've got both of those lists, and I've got a list for Danny. I just want you guys to talk amongst yourselves about the differences in the 3-4 front and the 4-3 defense, because on Danny's list, he's got players that are on your 3-4 list, Jordan. So I'm wondering, are you excluding these 3-4 edge rushers from being a member of the Chicago Bears?
No, by no means. I mean, I'll give you an example, and I wouldn't be surprised if Danny had him as a 4-3. I had Chop Robinson as a 3-4 backer. And it's not a scenario where I can't see a guy like Chop Robinson playing for the Bears in a 4-3 front. But he's got a very specific role that I don't think, and this is the way I kind of did my rankings, I don't think that his skill set is maximized as a weak defensive end in a 4-3. I think he'd be better as a jack linebacker in a 4-3, in a 3-4.
Yeah, and for me, I'm with you there, Jordan, as well. And when I put the list together for this segment in terms of the top 10 edge rushers, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but after the top 3 or 4 guys, I mean, I'm searching. I'm searching for guys with traits, guys that can fit this scheme, whether it's length, whether it's speed off the edge, and we all, I've come to the conclusion in the last couple of drafts that Eberflus likes long, rangy, athletic defensive linemen, whether they're inside guys, they're outside guys, they have to have the ideal height, they got the ideal length. Obviously, the edge guys, he wants them, power guys, speed guys. And so I went into this exercise saying, all right, we know he likes those. So I'm trying to find, true defensive ends, but I'm not looking for power guys specifically. I was looking for more twitchy, fast edge guys. And it's hard to find, like I said, we'll go through a list, and other than my top 3 or 4 guys, I mean, it's now I'm starting to pick and choose. And then I started going to guys like Chop Robinson, where his forte is pass rushing, right? He's not going to be a hand in the ground defensive end, a 4 down or 3 down defensive end. So what does he bring? He brings, and that's what I was looking for. I was looking for a speed guy, a twitched up a guy opposite of Montez Sweat, because Sweat gives you that power, that length that you're looking for, and that base end, the power end. Now you need some speed opposite of Montez Sweat, and that's why guys like Chop Robinson and some of the other guys we'll get into here, the guys that other teams that run odd man fronts are looking at as outside linebackers. I'm saying, all right, can these guys be situational pass rushers? Because like you said, with Eberflus, 65 to 70% of the time they're in nickel defense anyway, right? So that's where these guys can come in off the edge and just run after the quarterback. So, and the thing about Chop, we'll get into it, is I like his versatility in terms of we can line him up anywhere up and down that line of scrimmage, just kind of like a Micah Parsons, if you will, where he can rush from A gap or rush from the C gap, so on and so forth. So, well, we'll get into it, but it's for me. After I went through my list, I said, if the Bears don't go one of these edge rushers, top 3 guys in that number 9 pick, I mean, they probably should address this position in free agency is what I'm thinking here.
Yeah. It's funny to hear you say that, Danny, and I'll be very quick. Although I just think I think the thing that we probably find common ground on, Danny, is that this specific class, and to Aldo's point about how did I kind of put those in each list, I actually thought that so many of these guys were tweeners, not necessarily in body size or body weight, but I thought, boy, this guy honestly could play 4-3, 3-4. But to your point, and I think the chat knows this isn't the strongest edge class. So it left a lot on the bone with a lot of these guys, where I'm projecting a lot and not feeling great about a lot of them.
Right. Same way. I'm just projecting and thinking like, well, this is what this coaching staff likes. This guy doesn't give him that, but he gives him this.
It's
so
close,
this might
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so let's take a look at this list. At number 1 on the traditional 4-3. I'm sorry, I put the wrong one up. I got a lot of lists going on here. Here it is. This is Jordan and the odd front, the 3-4 outside linebackers. He's got Dallas Turner, and as you caught a glimpse there, Danny also had at number 1 Dallas Turner. So I'd like you guys to discuss what it is you like about Dallas Turner and what could be his potential flaws. Particularly, specifically, I want to know how he fits into the Chicago Bears defense and how perhaps he might have some challenges with the Bears. Jordan, why don't you start first? You're our guest.
Yeah, I think to me, Dallas Turner, exactly as you're seeing there, is edge 1. I see him much more as a jack linebacker, kind of that Leo role, if you will, in a 3-4. You're talking about just the frame right there is, I mean, he's rocked up. He looks great, good body, but doesn't have necessarily the bulk that I think the Bears would be looking for. And also hasn't shown a ton of experience with his hand in the ground getting after it. He played that jack role for Saban's defense. And to me, he's a guy that possesses incredibly long arms. We saw that today in the measurables. I mean, that allows him to use that long arm, get into an offensive tackle's chest. And he's got plenty of power behind his punch to where he's able to drive offensive tackles back on their heels, put them on skates, which is great. But I think that inherently you see kind of that immature game, for lack of a better word, in the sense where I don't see a huge pass rush plan for him. I see a lot of effort, I see strength, I see athleticism, but I don't see a refined rusher. And so I think when we're talking about Dallas Turner, you're doing a lot of projection into what he can be. And I mean, I know you're not asking for it, Aldo, so I won't give it just yet. But I mean, as far as that point to the projection of a prospect, that's why I do have Dallas Turner as my edge 1, because I think that if he ends up maximizing his potential and skill set, the player he can become is immense.
Yeah, and for me, Jordan, he's a hybrid player. He's a guy that for me can play a 4-3 end and a 3-4 end. Maybe not this year in terms of a hand in the ground, down on a 4-3 end. But I think you talked about that frame, right? He's 6'3", 247 with a 34+ inch arm length. I think that's where this staff would like that length there, right? He's athletic. He's 247, but I think his frame isn't maxed out, meaning that he could probably add another 5 to 10 pounds and not lose the athletic ability. So you're looking at a guy that's at anywhere between that 250, 260 range. Now you're looking at a guy that's more of a traditional defensive end in a 4-3. And I think that's where I'm projecting him here as a future Bear if the Bears go ahead and choose him. And just the athletic ability, right? We talked about that, the arm length. We talked about that first step quickness, his ability to get off the line of scrimmage, solid upfield first step. And that's what I like to see. Again, plays long. I like the fact that he uses his length to go ahead and press the offensive lineman, get him off his chest, and then be able to kind of use some of that speed to power conversion and walk them back into the backfield. And in terms of his run defense as well, which so surprised me, I like the half man technique where he uses that length to keep them men, kind of at bay here on the side, and uses other arm, free arm to kind of set that edge as a run defender as well. So projecting him with that athletic ability, with this production the last couple of years at Alabama, I think he's the guy that you can come in and utilize him as a 4-3 end, similar to what Will Anderson did last year with Houston, where they play a traditional 4-3 defense, but they use him in situations where they put him in stuff where he could maximize his talents. And I think that first step quickness, that length, and ability to kind of be a nice complement opposite of Montez Sweat is what gave Dallas Turner that overall top billing on my end. He's not my personal favorite edge player in this draft. We'll get to that guy later, but in terms of what scouting for the Bears and putting him with my mindset, looking for a defensive end opposite of Montez Sweat for this particular coaching staff and what they like to do, Dallas Turner got top billings for me.
The whole issue with Dallas Turner's weight was addressed at his press conference at the NFL Combine because it has fluctuated. He talked about that here.
The weight journey at Alabama was crazy. Coming in, I was 260 pounds, but that was a COVID-19 260 pounds. So, I fluctuated, played at my freshman year at 240, my sophomore year at 245, and my junior year at 255. But, probably the best weight I had was probably my junior year. That's probably the best weight I can move at, for real. And, I felt kind of powerful and stuff like that. And, compared to the 225 my freshman year by the end of the season, and the 255 I had my junior season, it was I could tell the difference for sure in the strength, the power, and the explosiveness and stuff like that. But, it felt good playing at 255 my junior year. So I feel like that could open up a lot of versatility and whatever defense, whatever type of scheme I'm in. So
255 is the weight that he wants. He thinks is ideal for him because of his explosiveness is at top rank. Danny, what do you think?
Yep. Yeah, that's what I said. I said, he's at 247 right now. Add about 10 pounds, he's going to be at 255, 257. So I think he's a guy who can carry that extra 10 pounds of muscle without losing that explosive first step and without gaining more strength, if you will, at the point of attack and being even more productive as a more of a traditional 4-3 defensive end.
Very good. Jordan, any final thoughts on Dallas Turner before we move on?
Yeah, I think the thing that you're seeing there too is, and this is, I'm sure, crossed Danny's mind when you're talking about taking Dallas Turner. I think the one thing that you can rest your head easy at night is knowing that you're getting a consummate professional before he even gets on into your team. Nick Saban coaches him up well. He's ready for an NFL weight program, NFL's type schedule, hard practices, and I think I see Tooch is kind of alluding to it there. Khalil Mack was 250. That's actually my and I understand it's a very lofty comp, but when we're talking about edge one in a class, this is where I think he can get to. Khalil Mack is actually my professional comparison for Dallas Turner. I see the same guy where kind of coming out kind of raw, but exudes extreme quickness off that first step and just jolts tackles back with his hands. And with that strength, with that frame, that power, kind of exerts his will, if you will, on those tackles. And I know that's probably what Danny found himself endearing about Dallas Turner as well.
All right, let me flip-flop over to Danny's list at number 2. He's got Jared Verse. Is this your favorite pass rusher, Danny?
No, believe it or not, he's not my favorite pass rusher in this class. He's a guy that I've been eyeing the entire season, though, dating back to last year. I thought last year if he came out, he had solid late first-round grade for me, but he surprised and he went back to Florida State. But with Verse, what he is he's first of all, he started off at Albany. He transferred to Florida State, and he played the last 2 years there. This is a guy that at 6'3", 254, with 33 and a half inch arm length, doesn't have the physique and the size and length that they per se would want in a 4-3 end, going back to they being Eberflus and his staff. But he's got the 4.59 40. He's got the 1.6 10-yard split. He's got that first step quickness. He's got some twitch in his body, and he's a powerful man. This is a man that he's a power rusher. He's a guy that will get after the quarterback. He's relentless in that extent of his game. You can see in terms of his effort, his max effort all the time. He's a guy that pursue backside. He'll pursue downfield, and we talk about that hits principle. This is a guy that will make Eberflus flush in terms of that hits principle. Again, that quickness off the edge, and he's not a guy that's bendy or is not twitched up. Right, we saw that in his 3 cone. He got the 7-3-1-3 cone that adheres to the fact that he's not a twitched up guy with great bend around the edge, but what he does do is he's a power rusher. He's a guy that uses his arms, his strength, his physique there. It goes at it and gets into the offensive lineman, and then it wills his way into the quarterback. And he does have, again, some good first step quickness and an ability. Once he turns that corner, he flans to the quarterback and he comes with authority. So he's a guy that's very productive. Had 9 sacks the last 2 seasons at Florida State. You see there he's struggling there with that drill. That really shows the lack of ankle flexibility there. So that shows some of that lack of bend to turn that corner. But when he does get around that tackle using some of that power, some of his use of hands, he's a guy that flans quickly to the quarterback, and he brings the quarterback down with authority. And again, I love his motor. I love his athletic ability overall.
Jared was asked about what's he most proud of, and he said it was his development in college.
It was my development. I feel like I was a good player. I was big, strong, fast, but it was the small things, the technical things, the little details, the minute details that it wouldn't matter in college football, but when you're in the NFL, when you're going up against 10-year vets, it's going to matter. Like I said before, the slight tilt of your hand, the little bit more of a lean forward, what's your offhand doing, even just becoming better at the top of my rush, hip flip, my hands, everything like that, just becoming better as a player.
I love it when players self-scout themselves and talk about what they've done and haven't done and so forth. Here's an interesting thing for you, Danny, is that number 1 on Jordan's list for a 4-3 even front is Jared Verse. Jordan, what do you think?
This is honestly the only edge rusher I would consider at number 9 if the Bears were to stick and pick at number 9. He's the guy that I think fits the Chicago Bears defense to a T. I'm with Danny, and on a personal preference, I would prefer a speed rusher, but I think everything that you've seen Matt Eberflus and this Chicago Bears defense look for is pocket crushers, if you will, people that are strong, powerful, strong side defensive ends, and they went and got one in Montez Sweat, and I don't think they're averse to the idea of, and no pun intended, to a Jared Verse on the other side, being able to really, to that same point, get out of his stance, shoot out low, and then drive his hands into tackles. I mean, you obviously played the clip there where he had an offensive tackle so far back on his skates, he ended up getting the sack off of it by just walking that tackle back. And really the key difference between Verse and Dallas Turner to me is it's in the refinement as a pass rusher. You see much more advanced hand usage with Jared Verse, and Danny really hit on it. And this is one of my favorite things about Jared Verse is it's not that Dallas Turner doesn't have this, but I just think Jared Verse exudes it on a play-by-play basis, which is just that inherently his motor runs as hot as it gets. You see him get after it play after play after play. And he's the type that'll tire an offensive tackle down as the game goes on. And his you can tell, I mean, obviously it's just a clip, but his mind is sharp and attuned to the things that he does and the way that he develops a rush plan that I think you see that on a rep by rep basis. And it's why I have him as, the guy for me if you wanted a defensive end for the Chicago Bears at number 9.
It was interesting that during the Combine, their NFL Network's broadcast, there was a comp to him and Will Anderson. I'm trying to find the graphic here it is. Daniel Jeremiah said that Will Anderson, who was drafted, second or third or fourth last year, and Jared Verse, their DNA is almost exactly the same. They're almost the same height, almost exactly the same weight. The arm length is almost exactly the same, and the 40-yard dash, they will run exactly the same. How impressive, Danny, do you find these numbers? No, you're muted.
My mic was, I pulled an Aldo. My mic was muted. Put $5 in that jar for me there, Aldo.
Yeah, I got it.
So this is a great comp. What I was saying is because, again, with Will Anderson last year as well, he was not that twitchy, edgy, twitchy, bendy guy off the edge. He was more of a power rusher, a guy that that would come off, using his athletic ability, his length, and be able to just bull his, his way into the backfield. And I think, he 7 sacks, was defensive rookie of the year. I think you use him and put him in a situation where he could utilize his strengths. I think that's the same thing with Jared Verse. Now, I'm out looking for speedy, twitchy edge rushers. But again, this class, it's very, very limited in terms of finding those, perfect fits with Montez Sweat. So, bringing a guy that like Verse that has some edge, has some twitch, but not the bendability that I was looking for, but has that power, the motor that we're talking about, I think would be a nice compliment. It wouldn't be the ideal compliment, but I think it'd be a nice compliment. And again, I agree with Jordan in terms of the guys so far we've talked about, between him and Dallas Turner. He is the prototypical 4-3 defensive end, if you like.
All right. Well, let's see who Jordan has at number 2 on his 3-4 front to see if we've got a speed rusher. There it is not. Yeah, this is the odd front. Latu Latu. Tell me why he is on your odd front at number 2.
Yeah, Aldo, to me, I think that, certainly I if I'm wrong, Danny, I'd love to know, but I think this is probably your favorite edge to watch, and it's hard to deny it. Watching Latu on film is a joy, because you're watching arguably the most refined rusher I've seen in probably quite some time. I mean, I can't even think of a guy that's come into the league with as deep of a toolbox in his pass rush plan. He's got good size, 6'4", a little light in the pants to me, not dramatically, but I think that he can get moved around in the run game a little bit. But you like the player that you're getting as a technician. I think where Danny and I are probably going to be very different on this player is I don't see the ceiling with him the same way that others do. I worry about, and I'm not even talking about medically, I'm just talking about, I think that I see a maxed out player. He's not an exceptional athlete. He's fine. He's good. But he doesn't have incredible length. His bend is solid. But I don't see an impeccable athlete that operates in a way that allows him to have a maximum ceiling that, you hear me talking about with the Dallas Turner, for example. And again, we haven't even talked about medicals. That's a whole other issue. But certainly to me, I think that you see a guy here that is winning on my board for what he is today. And there's less guesswork in the projection, but it also means I'm less excited about it.
Danny, your thoughts on Latu?
Yeah, and this, Jordan, you're right. This is my favorite pass rusher, or edge player, I should say, in this entire draft class. And he's been the guy for me for a couple months now. And then the thing I like about him is some of the things you already touched on, right? The technique. This guy is a technician with his hands. And you talked about, you can remember the last guy that came out, well, for me, the last guy that came out that had this type of advanced usage as a collegiate edge rusher was Joey Bosa. So that's how far back you go with a guy that can use his hands and get leverage, get inside. He's a guy that can win on the outside, win on the inside. Again, another guy that's got that motor that doesn't stop. Obviously, for me, the big concern with particularly with the staff. Besides the medical, right? The medical, I think we touched on in the previous shows. If we haven't, for a real recap, Latu started at the University of Washington, played for 2 seasons, and then had a neck injury. 5 doctors from the University of Washington failed him, told him he had to retire, or he's going to risk a chance of paralyzing himself. Took a year off. I believe he played rugby, if I'm not mistaken, for a year, and ended up come back, transferred to UCLA. And he's been lights out. He's been healthy. He's at 23 some sacks in the last 2 seasons. He's got 35.5 tackles for losses. I mean, this is the guy that affects both the run and the pass. But again, he's not a big, super athletic freak. He's just a guy at 6'5", 260 pounds. That's a 32 and a 5/8 arm length, which I think would or could be an issue for the staff, because I talked about earlier, they like the size, they like the length. But if you go back and just watch his tape, watch the production he's had the last 2 years of UCLA, this guy has been unblockable. So, if you're talking about a true, edge rusher, a guy that can come off the edge and be a guy. Now, I know Jordan has him as a 3-4 outside linebacker. I don't think he's that for me, because of the fact that Jordan touched on it. He's not the athletic type. So I think he doesn't, and having him drop back in coverage could be an issue for him for a 3-4 outside linebacker team. But what I'm talking about with the Bears is, we started earlier, right? 65, 70% of the time they're playing nickel. So if you bring this guy in as your nickel edge rusher, a guy that can come in on third downs or passing situations and use that ability that he has, that great ability to rush a passer, that's where he could be effective. That's where he could be a nice complement to Montez Sweat. Now, if you're in your base situation, you have DeMarcus Walker, if you bring in another veteran like a Rasheem Green or something like that, he can play your base end. and then you can bring a Latu in to be your pass rusher. So for me, the advanced hand usage, the technician that he is as a pass rusher, and the production he's had the last couple of years, minus the medicals, I'm assuming that all clears up. That's why he's my top pass rusher. Not sure this staff is going to like him because of the arm length issue that I talked about, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, I also don't think he's a guy that's worthy of. Actually, I don't think none of these guys are worthy, to be honest with you, of the 9th overall pick if we're going there. I think these are guys you can maybe trade down and get, whether it's maybe Turner's in that area, maybe, you have to kind of talk me into it. But for me, if the 9th overall pick, if it's the way it is right now, it's either got to be a receiver or one of those offensive linemen.
Latu said that he met with the Chicago Bears and that he really enjoyed the meeting. They had him throw darts. I guess you had a choice between putting and throwing darts, and it was a very relaxed environment. So he walked away very impressed. At the press conference, one of the things he talked about when he was asked was, he was asked, what is your strength?
It's my bending ability at the top of the rush, being able to get under those tackles and making it hard for them to counter back and block me at the top of the rush.
So, Jordan, he would disagree with you, I guess.
Well, to be fair, although I think that's probably his one ace in his toolbox is his bend.
Okay.
Outside of that, doesn't have exceptional length. To the point of why I have him as a 3-4 backer is, I'll give you a good example. If you watch Nick Bosa on any given play, and I know we're talking about a top edge, look at the way he first off, just look at the way he lines up in his stance. It looks like a cheetah getting ready to burst out of his stance. You don't see that burst from Latu because he's not that type of athlete. And my point, and again, he doesn't particularly defend the run exceptionally well, which is why I don't think the Chicago Bears and Matt Eberflus will be keen to a guy like Latu. And so when you ask that guy to put his hand in the dirt and play the run and also get upfield when he doesn't have exceptional burst, that's where I look at a guy like, why not stand him up in the 2-point stance? Let him use those hands from a advanced position where he is dictating the terms of engagement, and he already is in a position to bend. So that's why, particularly, I have him more in that 3-4 role as opposed to have a hand in the dirt.
The 34 tackles for loss, Jordan, last 2 years.
There's no denying. And for what it's worth, I do think this is important to touch on is, as far as the medical, I'm not saying it doesn't matter, and it's certainly going to play a role. I think you're going to see that, but I'm not particularly worried about the medical. He's done two good years of football, and if we're being honest, any player can get hurt with a career-ending injury on any given play. So if you like the guy and he fits what you're looking for, absolutely. There's no denying the production, Danny. I just think that when you consider what he provides for the Chicago Bears specifically, it's not it for me.
A couple things with the medical. What was important there, Jordan, is the contract, right? Because you'll get him for probably a 5-year contract, but is he going to be healthy enough to get a second contract, right? There's similar things came up with Miles Jack when he came out of UCLA in terms of not the same injury, but type of I forgot what his issue was, but he never made it to a second contract, unfortunately. So that's the thing, is like it's you're investing a high pick on a kid, and that's why I don't think he's going to go in the top 10. That's why I said none of these guys for me is a top 10 pick right now. I think I dropped down middle to late first round if I can get one of these guys there, but that medical in terms of him getting to a second contract is something you have to worry about. And yeah, compared to Bosa was the second or third pick in the draft. Obviously, Bosa's athletic traits and his ability are much higher and much to a different level than Latu. But comparing this kid to Bosa, I think it's unfair. Again, Bosa was the second pick in the draft, I believe it was, and this kid we're talking about mid first round. But just in terms of this class, I think what the Bears need is a pass rusher. He's the best pure pass rusher of the entire group. You did not.
It's another $5.
Is your 5 back? And I put my 5 in. For what it's worth, Greg Gabriel said that it was Stacey Dales of NFL Network reported that it was spinal fusion in the neck area, and that typically is not a major concern for NFL teams as long as the surgery was done correctly. So, and again, like you guys have said, the guy has played the last 2 years, so it's probably looking good that he's going to be cleared by NFL doctors. And when he was at the podium yesterday, he said that he had no scheduled medical tests, which I was shocked by. So I guess he's going to have a multiple medical tests when he visits these teams. All right, moving on. Danny, at number 4 on your pass rush list, you've got Darius Robinson, and I apologize to Missourians for misspelling Missouri. Tell me about Darius Robinson.
Yeah, we've talked about this guy. It seems like ever since the Senior Bowl, right? This is a guy that came out there at the Senior Bowl and just kind of wreaked havoc that whole week and just put on a show. His measurables came in at 6'5", 285 pounds with 34 and a half inch arms. So he's got that size, that prototypical length you look for in a traditional 4-3 in the ground defensive end, hand in the ground defensive end. 3-year starter at Missouri. A first team All SEC this past year. This is a guy that in my opinion could be scheme versatile. He's a guy that can play defense, like I talked about, defensive end in a traditional 4-3. I think you can line him up as an outside linebacker in a 3-4. I think he's got that type of athletic ability, and I also think you could kick him inside. I think that's probably his best position in the future, is kicking him inside on third downs and making him an interior 3 technique on passing situations. So, but I mean, tall, muscular, athletic frame with good length. We talked about our powerful frame, a solid play strength at the point of contact. This guy can take on blocks and maintain his ground, can press and pull offensive tackles, swim past him for a sack. This is a guy that I think his best football is to come here in the future. And I think just using him and utilizing him in a proper way, like I said, you could play him as a 4-3 defensive end, but I think kicking him inside as a rushing pass rushing defensive tackle is probably his best suit. I know his numbers today weren't great at the combine. I saw something flash over. I think it ran a 4.95 40 with a 1.73 10-yard split. That's not something typically you see with edge guys. So I think maybe he's 286 right now. Maybe add another 10 pounds, you're looking at 296, and you can kick him inside the full-time basis. So, this could be a guy that could start off as a defensive end and eventually work his way inside to defensive tackle. We'll see. But just the way he dominated, at the Senior Bowl and then, just the physique, the length, the size, and what he's done on tape. He had 8.5 sacks this past year at Missouri, 14 tackles for loss. Again, that was his only big season, if you will. So is he a one-hit wonder? That's another question you have to think about here with this kid. But just the hustle, the size, the strength, the speed factor. He's very intriguing. And again, it's a thin class, like I talked about earlier in the show, right? After your first 3 guys, you're kind of like looking at traits. You're looking at things that you could utilize here. Whether it's scheme fit, whether it's speed, whether it's a particular trait. So I think Darius Robinson doesn't fit the bill in terms of a perfect defensive end, but I think he gives you some things that you could utilize here. And again, not a guy in that top half of the first round. He's more of a guy, for me initially, was a second round pick. Might have kicked himself in the bottom half of the first round with what he's done at the Senior Bowl and something here at the Combine. But that's where I'm looking at here. Not a guy in the top 10.
And before I get Jordan's thoughts, I just want to let everyone in the chat know that we'll answer some of the questions that you're posting. We're focused right now on pass rushers, and will be for the next half hour or so. And then we'll get to some of the questions being asked in the chat room. So thank you very much for your patience on that. Jordan, you're fairly high on Darius Robinson too. You've got him at number 3.
I do. I love this kid. Exactly for what, this is for the Chicago Bears. This is frankly for any team. And I don't mean to be sacrilegious on the show, but I personally want to see him with Brian Flores and those Minnesota Vikings. To Danny's point, this is a guy that I think has 5 tech written all over his tape. And to the point, in these unique fronts, I think you can stand him up and just ask him to beat, excuse my French, to beat the shit out of an offensive tackle, play in and play out, for just how strong and dominant and physical he is at the point of attack. And by no means, I think that, he's got plenty of refinement to work on. He's not the smoothest mover. But as, Danny's talking about, you can absolutely, if you want to kick him inside on passing downs, that's fine. I certainly think he could play 3 tech. That's not the role I envision for him. I think that he's got enough athleticism to play a strong defensive end, a 5 tech, bully guards and tackles in at 4-eye. I think it only furthers his development when you move him inside and just let him beat up on guards and centers. So to me, Darius Robinson is a unique player, and one that I think really fits that strong defensive end. And I just think that's always important when you're looking at players. No player's perfect. You have to look at archetypes. When you're asking a guy that's 285, don't be surprised when he runs 4.9. That's different from a Latu, from a Turner, from a Verse who are 250, 260. Those extra 25, 30 pounds make a difference, but that's also why he dominates at the point of attack and can stand up to the run in ways that Latu, Turner, Verse, who are admirable in their own right, but they don't command the attention that Darius Robinson does against,
The 173, Jordan, bothered me more than the 495.
Yeah.
The 173, obviously, that 10-yard split. I thought he was quicker in terms of off the ball, up the field. So I thought I saw him somewhere in that 1.667 range, something like that. So it's just one test. He can go back to his pro day and run it again in Missouri and have the time that everyone expects him. So I'm not knocking him for that. I'm just saying that kind of might slow his momentum down in terms of what he had done at the Senior Bowl. But he was the talk of the Senior Bowl in terms of what he was doing in the one-on-ones, even the team drills. He was pretty much unblockable. So, but I've always saw him as an inside guy. I liked him more as an inside guy, a guy that gives you some of that, like you said, scheme versatility. So that's what I do like about Bob Robinson. But again, we're talking about guys that, for me at least, he's a second round, a day 2 guy. So we'll see where it ends up going.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I think when you're looking at him, that's my whole point about Robinson is with that 3 cone. He's not going to arc the corner. He's not going to bend the edge the way the Latu is. He's going to run through you. He's going to drive you back and go the most direct route to the quarterback through your chest plates, through one half of the man, if you will. But he's not playing there's no finesse to his game. It's I'm going to beat you up throughout the entire rep, and then you're going to get up, and we're going to do it again. And one of these times, I'm just going to bully you back, and you're not going to have a choice.
That's a lot of things we're seeing in this class, for me at least, is a lot of that. There's a lot of, it's other than Latu, really, there isn't. Versus to a certain extent as well, there isn't really a lot of hand technicians, guys that have been taught how to pass rushers, how to rush the passer. Coming out of this class. So that's something that is going through this class kind of disappointed me a little bit. But, there's multiple different ways to get to the quarterback, right? Talk about Will Anderson last year. He wasn't a defined pass rusher. He wasn't a guy that came out as a technician. He's just a guy that was athletic, hustled, played hard, and bullied himself into the backfield and ended up getting 7 sacks and Defensive Rookie of the Year this year.
It was interesting that Greg Gabriel posted that Darius's numbers today probably will force him to play a 3-tech. Now, if you ask Darius Robinson, he can play the 3-tech and he can play everywhere.
And, I can run, I can hit, I get my hands inside. I can do anything, man. Like, just give me an opportunity to put my cleats in the ground. I showed that at the Senior Bowl. I got better each and every day against the best competition in college football. I played in the SEC, which is the best conference in football. And that's the thing. I don't want to talk about myself too much. Just cut the tape on it and tell you.
And I love the guy's attitude. Love the guy's attitude.
Look how he's built.
Yeah.
He's just in his own clothes. Like, it's my type of, to Danny's point, I think that there's a beautiful art in watching guys like Latu work. But I just take a personal enjoyment watching these defensive ends. And this is why I love a 4-3 defense as much as anybody, but when you watch these 3-4s and you watch these 5-techs and these outside linebackers that are just, excuse my French, but brick shit houses, where they're just driving tackles back and they're just beating up on them. Those are my favorite type of players, and that's where, to Darius Robinson's credit, he can play every position on that line. He can play 5. He can play a strong defensive end as a 6 technique. He can play 5, 4-eye, 3-tech. Put him in a 2-eye and watch him just destroy a center and guard for fun. I mean, it's that level of player.
All right.
Violence. I found out Jonah just loves violence.
I do. Football should be played as bully ball.
I saw you more as a lover, not a fighter, Jordan. But it looks like you're
I love bully ball. It's my favorite form of it.
I love it. All right, interesting pick here for Jordan. Again, this is on an even front. At number 4, he's got the kid from Oregon, Brandon Dorles. Tell us why you like him at number 4 for, again, an even front.
Yeah, Brandon Dorles to me is he's a player I summer scouted and loved when I watched him. I think that he's a player that is unique. I mean, who he reminded me of is Carl Brooks from last year, and he's a bit of a tweener. I certainly could see somebody like Danny even saying, I had him more as a 3-tech, but I even think in some ways he's one of these, a perfect example. And I said, these guys can fit in odd fronts and even fronts, 3-tech all the way to even, a 5 technique. So I think that he's a bit of a versatile scheme guy, but inherently when we're talking about Dorles, he's another guy that, as Danny's talking about, these big, strong defensive ends that really man the gap and man their man and control them and move them against their will. And so I think he can fit the run. I think that as a senior at Oregon, he's picked up a decent amount of skill with his hand usage. Not, the bendiest guy or anything of that sort, but he does play with a hot motor, pretty good football IQ. He's always usually around the ball. If I did have a complaint about him, I didn't think that his motor was anything exceptional. I didn't find that he was constantly in pursuit, but consistently made plays for that Oregon defense for Dan Lanning this year. And that's why Brandon Dorles is a guy that I've really been keen on since I watched him. And a lot of it's for that tweener style that reminded me of Carl Brooks.
Danny, you got thoughts on this prospect?
Well, Jordan knows me well. I do see Dorles as an inside three technique. I don't see him as an edge guy. That's why I didn't study him for this class. I studied him, but I haven't studied him in as terms of as an edge player. He's a guy that Oregon lined up inside and outside. He's got some size in terms of 6'3", 283, 33 and a quarter inch arms, 4'8", 540, but the 168 10-yard split. So he's a guy for me. If you give him the ability to hit that A gap, that B gap as a three technique. He's got some twitch to him. I like that first step get off at the line of scrimmage. Jordan's right. The motor isn't consistent. You don't see a guy that's given, in my opinion, a max effort throughout the play of the that they're particular in, and whether it's backside pursuit down the field. You'll see it sometimes. Occasionally you'll see him chase down a play, but it just doesn't consistent. So, but yeah, he's a guy that I see more as an inside guy as opposed to an edge guy.
All right, I'm getting back to Danny's list here as we flip-flop. This is fun. At number 5, and Jordan, you sent me a message saying, I bet people are going to be upset at me because I got Chop Robinson, where I got him, and we'll reveal where in a moment. But Danny has Chop Robinson at number 5. Danny, tell us why.
Again, I came out saying, all right, this is not going to be a class that's got the perfect player, right? You're going to have to have the 3 guys. You're going to have to pick and choose. And Robinson, the whole time I've been saying, Aldo, and you're contested this, I've been saying I want a twitched up speed guy opposite of Montez Sweat. I don't care if he can't play the run. I just want him to go up there and on third down and passing situations to help Montez Sweat and the boys get after the quarterback. And I know the production is not there in terms of what he put up at Penn State, but Chop Robinson is that kind of guy. 6'2", almost 6'3", 254. Doesn't have the ideal length with only 32 and a half inch arms. Ran a 4.49 40, a 1.54 10-yard split, 34 and a half inch vertical, and a 10.8 broad jump, showing that explosiveness in his lower half. Athletic, quick twitch, edge defender, sudden athlete, explosive first step, quick off the snap, quickness and feet to cross the face mask of a tackle, win inside leverage, get to the quarterback. He can line up and rush from a 2-point stance, from a hand in the ground as a defensive end. In terms of his run defense, he's quick. He's not great. He's quick, but he uses that quickness to sometimes get skinny and penetrate in between a guard and a tackle and get inside it and make some plays in the backfield. Has experience dropping back into coverage, so a lot of teams might see him as an odd man, front guy, an outside linebacker. But for me, he's just a situational pass rusher. Again, not a guy that I would use any of the first 2 picks on. Obviously, this is like if you're able to trade back, or even if you get a second round pick, and he's available, I think he'll be available in the second round. I think that's, or maybe even depending on what his measurables came out, how teams see him now with some of these measurables, whether they see him as a third rounder, who knows? But in that day 2 range is where I see Chop Robinson being available. And again, just a guy that's twitched up, going after the quarterback. I said that's what I'm going to be looking for, and this is that prime example of a guy that's just a sudden freak athlete.
Regarding his speed, Next Gen Stats said that his 4.48 40-yard dash, that was the official time, is the 5th fastest among 250-plus pound edge rushers at the combine, and that is similar to Byron Young from last year. Similar size and the athleticism profile to that Rams edge rusher who was drafted last year. So
and he went and Byron Young went the third round.
Exactly.
And he was effective as a rookie. He played a lot of snaps this year as a rookie.
Right. So Jordan had him at number 4 on his list of 3-4 lineups.
Yeah, and you're seeing Austin Booker there. Maybe we can get to him because that's a kid I'm enamored by.
We will.
But Chop Robinson, this is a guy that I'm not nearly as high on. I don't want to make it sound like I hate the kid, I'm down on the kid. Just because I don't love somebody doesn't mean that I think he's the worst player. But to me, this is a player I find to be an incredibly specialized role player. It works if you're running the D'Amico Ryans front or the San Francisco 49ers front, meaning that if you want him in a 4-3 front, he has to play wide 9, 2-3 yards separated out from the tackle with an extreme angle advantage. And that's really the way that they worked with him. I'm not denying that first step quickness. I think Danny really put it well. He is a sudden athlete. But I watched his get off, and as good as that get off was, it was actually really unique to me. His feet don't actually cover a lot of ground. It's not like some really – I was talking about Nick Bosa earlier. explodes out of his stance, gains massive depth in the backfield when he does it. It's weird watching Chop. He'll get off the ball quick, but they're almost like short little choppy steps. And in that, it is that suddenness. I didn't see a guy that used his hands exceptionally well. He has a one move that I saw continuously, which is just he does a double swipe to try to get the hands out. And that sounds great and it looks good. But again, he didn't have all this production. And more importantly, the reason he was able to do that is, and this is effective at Penn State, so maybe it'll work in the NFL. He would get tackles set in panic mode because they're watching this guy who's lightning fast that they can't get out to. So they are sitting here forced to open up in a 45-degree set to try to attack Chop. And by the time that he's got that angle and they put their hands out, he's double swiping them away, and he's fast enough to do that. And if you think you can emulate that in the NFL, by all means. But this is a guy that I hear people talk about him. He's the next Micah Parsons. My pro comp for him is Vic Beasley. I'm a lot lower on him than many others because I think he's a relatively limited player. As Danny said, he was dropped a lot, which is why I think he'd be better in a 3-4. Use his athleticism in that way as opposed to putting him in disadvantageous situations. His motor's good. I do think he's a try-hard. He's a try-hard player in the sense that he will try to stand up to the run, but again, he's not the biggest guy, so he does get blown off the ball. But he's effective when they move him around, and like I said, if you're trying to put him in a 4-3 front, you're so limited in the ways that you can use him because you can't line him up in your traditional 6 technique where he's taking on one half the man because that's not his game. He needs that wide set, which is why I'm saying a guy like D'Amico Ryans or what they've been doing in San Francisco where these guys can line up so far out and just get that kind of sprinter stance is what you're looking for with him. And I just don't see that as a fit for the Bears.
See, with Jordan, you're right. He's not a guy you can line up as a traditional 4-3 defensive end and expect him to win down and down. But he's that athlete type that where you can line up in a 2-point stance. You can float him around, line him up in an A gap in that elephant position, if you will, line him up in a B gap, and just move him around and get the offensive lineman to worry about that athletic ability, that speed, that first step explosiveness that he can penetrate into the gap and get into the backfield. So that's why. Again, not the ideal guy, not the guy that I would be, taking day one, but he's a guy that gives you that trait, right? That explosiveness that you don't have right now off the edge. And I think that's what I've been looking for. And now if Eberflus, I've been told by a lot of people, Eberflus is a great defensive coordinator. Well, if you got a weapon like this, utilize him in a way where you could put him in a position to succeed, right? Micah Parsons came out as a linebacker. Next thing you know, Dan Quinn's got him lined up as an edge guy, line him up as an elephant rusher from the middle. Again, talking about rushing that B gap to A gap, just line up all over the place, utilize the athletic ability, that first step quickness, and get him to get pressure on the quarterback. That's what I'm looking for, Chop Robinson. I have no, fairy tales that he's going to put a hand in the ground and be a down and down defensive end for this team at 6'2" and whatever, 260 pounds. But he's an athlete. He's an athlete that you could utilize in different ways. You can scheme him to get pressure, generate pressure to go along with the other guys you have up front.
All right, let's get to Austin Booker, who Jordan is a big fan of. Tell us why.
This is a kid that, if I told you that I loved the other play that we were speaking of, which is Darius Robinson, then I am enamored with Austin Booker. This is a kid where and similar to the J.J. McCarthy love I have, I guess I just really enjoy prospects that are a total mystery grab bag when you're drafting them. But the negative, and I'm sure Danny will talk about it, but Austin Booker has 500 snaps to his career in college. Previously was a Minnesota player and then transferred to Kansas, where he played this year and exceeded. My favorite thing about him is, and he reminds me a lot of Daniil Hunter in a sense where he needs to develop, he needs to kind of sit. But already what is so intriguing, and this is why I fell in love with this player, is his hand usage is second to me to only Latu Latu. In this class, he shows an advanced move set, an advanced toolbox of the pass rush moves that he uses. And again, I'd kind of characterize him as that try hard. He tries in the run game. I actually think he's an incredibly aware player. He finds ways to make plays in the alley and the gaps on wide receiver screens, things of that sort. So his motor's good, but particularly as a pass rusher, I wasn't expecting when I turned on the tape of Austin Booker to see a guy that was hitting spins and Euro steps and showing good dip on rushes, jump chop moves, swipes, swim moves. It's all there. And so to me, this is a guy that I think the NFL's, and maybe not the NFL, but at least the media is sleeping on way too much. I think Austin Booker is a guy that I would take a swing on pretty high for what he brings as a package as a rusher.
Danny, you didn't have him too far down on your list. You had him right behind Chop Robinson at number 6. Tell us why.
Yep. Surprise, surprise, Jordan. Austin Booker is a guy that I saw at the Senior Bowl, and I like, who the hell is this kid with the Kansas Jayhawk helmet on? And again, yeah, you hit it. 2 years at Minnesota, couldn't get on the field, which has me questioning PJ Fleck even more. But goes to Kansas, has the 1 year. He's only a redshirt sophomore, so he still has at least 2 years of eligibility left. But comes out, after 8 sacks, 12 tackles for loss, and you talk about the length, right? He's 6'6", 245. Almost 34-inch arm length, quick first step. And this is the guy Jordan, I think you kind of knocked him out his run defense, but actually he impressed me in terms of his run defense. He's a guy who can string out the run. He can go ahead and make sure he can shed a tackle. He can shed a block and make a tackle. He's not afraid to lower his shoulder into the offensive tackle and take on blockers to be able to set that edge for a guy, again, 245 pounds. So he shows some guts, and he doesn't have the frame and the size that you typically look for at edge players, but man, he shows ability. He talked about his pass rush moves, got that first step get off. He talked about the use of hands. Yeah, he's got the rip, he's got the swim, he's got a nice spin move where he gets the tackle leaning to his outside and then spins back inside as a counter move. So this guy really, really impressed me. Again, just a 1 year wonder. So this is a guy that you can develop, right? Eric Washington and the staff here can get a hold of this guy. He's got the length you're looking for. Might need some more, about 10 more pounds of muscle, I'm guessing, about 255. He can maintain that speed, that athletic ability, and not get slowed down, not get bogged down. He's got that thin frame that he can add some more muscle to it. So I think this is a guy that, again, might not be a day one, week one contributor, but man, you get this kid in, you develop him. He's got that passion, the energy. He's got that want to. And again, at 245, he's taking on 300-pound offensive linemen that are pulling at him. He's putting a shoulder in them, and he's got no fear. So I think that really stuck out to me. And again, he's developing as a pass rusher, right? And we already talked about his hand usage, right? The swim, the rip. Talk about how many guys we talked about don't even have any of that on their tape. And this is a guy that's really just been on the field for 1 year, and we already see a lot of that development. So really intrigued by this guy. Obviously, he's a developmental kid, right? So, where are you going to get him? It all depends. But you have to have a package for him. If you get him in the second round, you get him in the third round, you have to develop and start him, off and just, hey, go get the quarterback. See quarterback, hit quarterback. That's what you got to do. That's all you got to worry about. And I think that's where you kind of start him off there and then now develop him as he goes along. And I think you could potentially have a guy that develops into a full-time starter for you.
Excellent work, gentlemen. Number 7, Danny, on your list right after Booker is Adisa Isaac over at Penn State.
Yep. This is the guy I've been talking about for a while as well here. And Adisa Isaac, Chop Robinson got the notoriety. He was the big name on that defensive line at Penn State. But Adisa Isaac was that heart and soul. And you watched that Penn State team, you saw Adisa Isaac was the guy getting into guys' faces, motivating the guys. He's the guy that was a team captain this past year, right? Came in at 6'4", 247 pounds with 34-inch arms. So he's got the length you're looking for there. Solidly put together. This guy's got a defined lower body, flexibility in his lower half, solid upfield burst. Okay, high energy, high effort pass rusher. Another guy that can convert speed to power. Plants his hands into the chest of the offensive lineman and it will just drive them back. In terms of as a run defender, he's quick to locate. He can pierce into the backfield. He's got 31.5 career tackles for loss at Penn State. Sack numbers are not great. Last year, 7.5 were his highest. He's got 14.5 for his career. But he's a guy in terms of as a pass rusher. Again, he's more of a speed to power kind of guy, not refined in terms of his hand usage. But he can stack and shed tight ends in terms of as a run defender. Again, he's more stout than you would think at the point of contact. A high effort, high energy guy. Again, will track down plays backside, down the field, so on and so forth. So I love the way he diagnoses the play quickly. Will locate the football. And again, plays with that energy and that effort that I think at the worst case can come in and give you, really, really good snaps opposite of Montez Sweat and give you some good pass rush ability off that edge.
Jordan, you have Adisa at number 7 on your. Why don't you tell us what you like about him, and then we'll circle back and talk about Chris and Jonah.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting to hear. I saw J2K saying that Danny and I are sleeping on Adisa Isaac, and I'd argue with that a little bit. I know that you see Chop higher, and the only reason you're seeing Chop higher is just for the athletic profile and what he can become. But I have to be honest, as we sit here today on February 29, 2024, I like Adisa Isaac as a player more today than what I do with Chop Robinson. And I mean, some of that's to be expected. He's an older prospect. He has a little bit of injury history. He missed a season, I believe, for an Achilles. I could be mistaken on the exact injury, but did miss a year. But I think he's a feistier player. I think he shows I know Danny said that the hands aren't great, and I'm not saying they're elite, but I think he shows a better hand usage and hand combat than his running mate Chop Robinson. And I see a guy that, as J2K's talked about, has the ability to build upon that frame. I think that, to me, though, he's an odd front backer. I don't want him, putting his hand in the dirt, playing as in an even front as a defensive end. But I think that he has the want to, has the desire, shows good bend, shows pretty decent hand play for where he's at in his career. And I think that, like I said, right now I'm higher on him than I am with Chop as of today. But again, when you talk about projection, that's where you have to, change things a bit.
All right, stay with you there, and let's talk about those two other guys. For starting with Chris Braswell from Alabama, you have him at number 5. Again, this is the odd front.
Yeah, Chris Braswell, to me, I mean, this is a guy that gets slept on because his name's not Dallas Turner, but he is a positive contributor on that. Again, that pro defense. This is a guy that's going to come in ready to play. Not necessarily the twitchiest, not the best athlete, but a smart player who defends the run well, always is willing to fit it, insert his shoulder into it, not get moved off the ball. And again, not in a way that you're going to see elite bend from him, but I think that he does string together a decent amount of pass rush moves. He shows to have a decent plan. And again, what really kind of keeps him high here is that in comparison to other players where I think maybe the motor is not quite there, like a Brandon Dorles, Chris Braswell to me has a motor that just keeps on running. And I mean, I've heard him talk about that in that Bama world where he had to kind of grow and learn to get into his role because he had guys like Will Anderson and Dallas Turner and others in front of him, where he didn't get a chance really until this year to show. And I thought that he showed well as a really well-rounded player. To something that Danny and I have been alluding to is that there's not really a guy that's going to blow your hair back in this class outside of maybe those top 3 guys. But Braswell is a guy that I would feel comfortable if you were an odd front team to get a guy that can fit the run and play the pass equally well. Maybe not going to be an elite guy, but a routine contributor in the sack game, pass rush game.
Yeah, me too, Jordan. I don't see him a fit for this scheme, particularly as a 4-3 guy, and even as a situational pass rusher. I mean, he's got sub 33-inch arms, doesn't have that quick twitch, the first up explosion off the line of scrimmage. He's a good athlete. I just didn't see that on tape, so I just don't know if you'd offer something to this team. I just think he's not going to be a fit for this team. So I think I didn't even put him down as a possibility. But for a 3-4 team that has an outside linebacker, I think he could be a guy that can come in and develop for them and be a contributor initially, probably on special teams, and then probably get on the field as a guy that can be a down and down player. But I like the effort, like the motor, plays hard. A hard hitter, is a physical in terms of toughness and all that stuff. But I just didn't see him as a fit for this scheme.
Sandwiched in between Braswell and Isaac, Jordan has Jonah Ellis out of Utah. Tell us why you like Jonah.
Yeah, Jonah Ellis, I mean, I don't want to make it sound like the only reason he's high is because he's Luther Ellis's kid, but I mean, he's got some brothers in the league. I think that he understands what it is to be a pro. His father was a pro. And again, when you just look at the player, I think that if I had a complaint about him, he's obviously very slight. He's 6'2", roughly 240-ish. Again, this is why he's an odd front 3-4 outside linebacker. He's not somebody I'd consider really for the Chicago Bears. But when you talk about exciting edges, I think that he's a guy that is clearly still developing. He's a worker. He has a incredible spin move. That's where it's really his go-to move. He learns to win off that, but he has also got, a swipe move that really kind of beats the hands around the corner. He's a guy that I think would fit well in a odd front as kind of that Leo backer that we've been talking about. Put him in as a stand-up. And he's not, again, I'm not telling you he's the bendiest guy or anything of that sort, but he's a good athlete, developing with his hand usage, good enough size. And again, some of the production's there in Utah. I mean, in that Utah defense, if you won't hear me say too many nice things about the former Pac-12, but if there was a program in that conference that exuded what it is to be a pro-style defense, a hard hitter, a worker, it was that Utah program. And I think that Jonah Ellis really came on this year.
Thoughts on Jonah, Danny?
Yeah, Jonah Ellis is a guy that I wanted to like, Jordan. I watched him, and obviously, he led the Pac-12 until he got injured. Suffered a season-ending shoulder injury. I believe it was week 10 or week 11 of the season, and he was out. But up to that time, he had 12 sacks. He was doing great. He's a former off-the-ball linebacker that was converted to an on-ball on-ball defender. And again, he's a guy that against, for me, a lot of his sacks came on effort. And he's a guy that, again, another one that's motor's always running hot. The guy will never stop. You talked about his pedigree. Luther Ellis was his dad. Caden Ellis plays for, I believe, the Saints or the Falcons. I forgot which team he's on right now, his brother. So, he comes from the NFL pedigree. And like I said, I wanted to like him, but it's just, there's nothing there in terms of, can I bring this guy in and be a situational pass rusher? I just didn't see a game there in terms of, I didn't see a game plan. I didn't see a repertoire in terms of him being a consistent pass rusher at the next level. Again, a guy you might make a roster as a special teams guy, and then maybe a guy you can develop or something. But I just didn't see him someone as can come in here and be a contributor and help, get after the quarterback initially. I wanted to like him. I just couldn't find anything that I would say, all right, let's attach to this and we can go ahead and get this guy into here and make him a player. Unfortunately, he might be a guy that could be a 3-4 outside linebacker, but he's most likely going to be, in the league on special teams.
Yeah, I can't really argue too much, Danny. I'll be quick here, Aldo, but I think that the thing with him is just that you're right about this. There is no real plan. He's got 2 moves, and it's okay. I shot 1, it didn't work. I'm going to 2, which is usually the spin. But to your point, that motor, that effort is what led to that production. And call me a little crazy for projecting this, but this wouldn't be the first time we've seen in the league on Sundays these high motor effort guys that find a way to just get to the quarterback. And I'm not telling you I think he's going to be some 10-12 sack guy year in and year out, but I do, and it's okay to be different on this. I think that he's got a unique role that'll fit somewhere in a 3-4 beyond just special teams because of the pedigree, because of the effort, because of the program that he came from. And as long as he can continue to train and develop that hand use, you've seen lesser rushers make an impact on Sundays.
All right. A lot of people are probably wondering, when are you guys going to talk about Brillan Trice? Well, both of you guys have him at different parts of your list. Danny towards the bottom, Jordan towards the top. Danny, why don't you start with why you have Brillan Trice at number 8?
Yeah, I struggled with Brillan Trice. Not that I don't like him. I love the player. I mean, every time I put a tape on in Washington, he's always making plays, and he's a guy that like he's right here, high energy, high effort, high motor. We talked about a lot of these guys having that high energy, high motor stuff. And 2-year starter, 2-time All Pac-12 first team member. Had 16 sacks the last 2 seasons. 23.5 tackles for loss. So he's a guy that affects the pass and the run. The style of first step, upfield, just a straight line power rusher, a guy that likes to rush through the tackle or through the blocker as opposed to going around the blocker. So he brings that level of physicality, that toughness on your defensive line. And again, talk about that effort, that motor that just never stops. Some of the things that obviously that kind of put him on top for me was the guy is always making plays. He doesn't look here, like you said, he doesn't look like the biggest or the most athletic defensive end, but man, he's always around the football. He's always making plays. He's always affecting the pass. He's always affecting the passer. He's always getting into the backfield, making plays. He's chasing plays down so that's the effort, that motor. And again, he's a pretty good athlete. Now, what surprised me with him was I had him at around 260. He came in today at 245. Okay. Ran a 4.7, 240. I think it was a 1.7. Was it a 1.7 split? I forgot what his numbers were in terms of his testing, but that's a huge drop off in terms of where you were on tape or where I expect you to be. And now did he lose all that weight to be an outside linebacker? Did he lose that weight to run that they go for it? So that's some questions there, but in terms of just effort and even though, and he doesn't have the length, right? He's only 6'2". He came in at 6'3". With 245 pounds with 32.5 inch arm length. So that doesn't fit the profile of this staff that I've been talking about here. But again, just you watch him on tape and you just can't leave him off your top 10 list of edge players in this class, especially because this class, like we said, isn't great. But just I love the player. I love the energy. I love the effort. I love the production. There's questions in terms of how he fits in the scheme. And then now I have this question of that weight loss. Was it just to run a good 40. So that's also kind of mucks up his projection here as well.
Yeah, that's what Daniel Jeremiah surmised, that the weight loss was because he wanted to run a good 40. Jordan, you've got him all the way up at number 2 on your even fronts. Tell us why you have love for Brillan Trice.
I have a type, as you guys can probably tell now. And Danny really Danny said, well, how does he win? He likes to run through guys. He's violent. He gets after it. He's got a high motor. He's always around the ball, always making plays. Danny really, I mean, I don't mean to piggyback off everything, but Danny really gave my scouting reports almost like he read off my notes here. Brillan Trice is my type of guy. I agree with Danny and Daniel Jeremiah. I think that's not his weight today was not representative of what he was at Washington. But when we're talking about, and you'll notice he's number 2 for even front defensive ends. I wouldn't tell you that he's like my number 2 edge in this class, but when we're talking about really this list is built for the Bears. When I'm thinking about what the Bears need or what I think this staff would like at defensive end, Brillan Trice is very similar to Verse in that way. He's a guy that just off of what we've seen and I'm not talking just about what with the Bears and, DeMarcus Walker players like that. I'm talking about Deo Odeyingbo and Kwity Paye back in Indianapolis. When you saw the type of defensive ends that Matt Eberflus liked, it was this style, these pocket crushers, these people that condense, and they do have a high motor. You're not having to coach them to stop loafing. They do have a nose for the football. They're just relentless in their pursuit. And again, I don't think he's the flashiest. To Danny's point, I don't think that you'd even really notice him if not for just this way of winning. He finds a way to impact the game. And at a certain point, you can deny his measurables, maybe his testing, but you just turn on the tape, and it's kind of like what Darius Robin was saying, turn on the tape, you'll see me. That really rings true for Brillan Trice. There's no way to disregard him when you watch the tape, and I think that translates to Sundays.
All right. Jordan, let's stay with your list. And it's, again, this is even fronts. Marshon Nean is at number 5.
Yeah, Marshon Nealon's a guy that is interesting. He was kind of the last of the pack there once Braden Fisk left Western Michigan. And Marshon Nean is a guy that as Danny and I have kind of continued to belabor on this point, these power rushers, these guys that exude a lot of effort, have real heavy hands as they push the pocket. He's a push-pull artist. He's going to win by just jolting you. Nean doesn't show any advanced hand usage or anything of that sort, but he's the type that I wouldn't be the first to say this, but he reminds me of an outside linebacker for the Baltimore Ravens in the way that they're going to stash him, develop him, and watch him become the next type of Zadarius Smith, where he's just a strong brute that finds a way to beat up on tackles and wins with effort and motor and some of just that high power in his hands that really finds ways to create advantages for him to get to the quarterback. And as you're kind of rolling this highlight, you're seeing it. Look at him just drive back there. I mean, it's not an advanced game, but there's no denying what he can be just based on the size, the profile, and the heaviness in his hands. I mean, it's consistent as you watch the tape.
And Danny, you've got him at number 9 on your 4-3 list. Why don't you take over?
And I try to keep him off the list, to be honest with you, because like there's nothing in his game that I love. I mean, other than the fact he's got the size, right? He's 6'4". I have his numbers here. He came in at 6'3", actually 3'6'3", 268. 34.5-inch arm length. So he's got the size, he's got the length. He's a solid athlete, right? In high school, he was a regional champion in the 400 meters. He was a all conference as a high jumper. So he's got that athletic ability, 3-year starter. But again, a guy that played in the MAC for 4 years and never really produced. I think the highest number of sacks he had was 4.5. For his career, he's got 12.5. So he's not a guy that's going to go out there and flash. But again, looking at this class and looking now at this point, I'm like, all right, what do you bring to the table? And like Jordan said, he's got heavy, strong hands. He's got a motor that runs hot 24/7. He's a guy that you put him on the football field, he's going to try to run through the blockers that are in front of him. He doesn't care if there's 1 blocker, 2 blockers, 3 blockers. He's going to try to run right through them and bury a hole in them and get to the quarterback. And that's his game. And I don't know whether he's going to stick to the outside, they're going to add 10 pounds of muscle, kick him inside as a defensive tackle. Who knows? But he's a guy that I think just by brute, by strength, by size, and athletic ability, it was going to make a roster, and some defensive line coach is going to fall in love with him and just say, you know what, I can teach this guy how to rush a passer. I can teach this guy how to be a 4-3 defensive end. So that's why I think, again, look here, I'm looking for traits. I'm looking for a guy that's got something that can bring to the table. And again, size, length, and hustle and heart is what this guy brings. And I think he's going to find his way on an NFL roster. And I think some defensive line coach is going to fall in love with him. That's twice, Aldo.
Yeah, $5 again.
Jeez. I'm broke now, guys. So it's over. Um, I'd like to stay with Danny, get his number 10 pick, and then we've got about probably 5 players that Jordan had on his 2 lists that we'll talk about. So let's go to number 10, and Jordan has him on one of his lists. It's the kid from Troy, Javon Sullivan.
Yeah, another guy that doesn't fit the bill in terms of what I've been preaching here, what this defense staff wants, right? The size. He's only 6'1", 246. He's got some decent length. He's got 34-inch arms, so I think that might buy him a ticket onto this roster. And the other thing he's got an athletic ability. He's got a solid body. He's got a body that's kind of chiseled here. Production wise, he led the Sun Belt with sacks this last year with 16. He's got 33 sacks for his career. He's a redshirt senior, so he's played 5 years, and he's got almost 50 tackles for loss. And again, talk about that lower body strength. He's got a powerful hip thrust. He's got the quick first step. This guy plays bigger than his size when you watch him on tape. Solid upfield get off at the line of scrimmage. Can turn the corner, and when he flies to the quarterback, he comes with mean intentions. I mean, the quarterback feels him whenever he hits them. Again, for someone his size, he's pretty solid against the run. Now, he can get engulfed and manhandled by bigger blockers, but again, 6'1", 246. He's a guy that uses that lower body strength I talked about to be able to maintain his ground and do a decent job there. Athletic, a guy that's got strong hands, and also a guy that shows me on tape that he's got a game plan when it comes to rushing the passer. So the production, the frame is not there, but the production and the will and also the power, the base power is there as well. So I think, again, a guy that doesn't fit this defensive staff to a T, but I just couldn't leave him off the list because of, again, the production and what I saw in terms of effort, and then also the athletic ability he put on display today. He ran a 4.7 240, a 1.66 10-yard split, 37-inch vertical, and at 9 foot 11-inch broad jump. So we saw some of that the lower body power with that vertical there as well. So a kid that really intrigues me. Again, might just only be a situational pass rusher. Who knows? But this is one of the guys that production has been massive. I know it's only the Sun Belt, but still, it's the Sun Belt, and he's got 33 sacks for his career, and just that motor and the ability to the hand usage. I think he's a guy that can come in and be a situational pass rusher for you.
Jordan, go ahead and unmute. I'll save you $5, and you got him at you got him at 10. So talk about Javon Sullivan. Again, this is the odd front, and then take us through 9 and 8 as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Danny did a really good job summing it up with Javon Sullivan. I mean, when we're talking about Javon Sullivan, I think the biggest issue with him is, as Danny's talking about, it's the Sun Belt League, which is not a knock. It's just one of those things where the competition isn't the quality of other rushers. And then it's the reality that he's just a shorter edge. Outside of that, I'd be hard pressed to have somebody actually point out to me what are their issues with Javon Sullivan. I think to Danny's point, he's probably more of a part-time designated pass rusher because of the lack of size. But he's a freak athlete. He shows a advanced repertoire with a pass rush plan and moves. He's athletic. I wouldn't say he's like the bendiest guy or anything of that sort, but the production is hard to deny. And like I said, I have him here as an odd front edge backer because I just don't think that a guy of his frame is going to hold up in an even front, particularly because of that lack of height. But he's a guy that, I mean, I'm not at all calling him this, but he wouldn't be the first guy if he succeeded in the league at this frame. I mean, I think when I see guys like Javon Sullivan, I think of guys like Elvis Dumervil, who was incredibly successful despite being a 6 foot 6'1" edge rusher. And again, he had some years where he was an even front, but again, had some years where he was really thriving as an odd front, weak side outside linebacker. And I think that's where Javon Sullivan can thrive.
Very good. What do you like about Gabriel Murphy at UCLA?
Yeah, Gabriel Murphy's. He's the. If you're not confusing him with his brother Grayson, he's a guy that he's down here on the list for a reason. I don't think that any of these guys are particularly exceptional in any particular department, but Gabriel Murphy was a guy that I found consistently kind of to call it a discount Brillan Trice, if you will. I always found like he was around the ball, always making plays, decent pass rush repertoire. Transferred from, I believe, was it North Texas to UCLA. So he's got decent size. He's a little bit slight. Like I said, that's why I have him here as an odd front outside backer. But I think a guy that is a little more finesse than power. But the reason you see him, for example, here on the list as opposed to his brother is I think that he does show a better use of his hands and a little more power in his game.
Very good. Before you comment on him, Danny, let's let Jordan talk to us about Mohamed Kamara out of Colorado State.
Yeah, Mo Kamara is a funny one because I think, and I wouldn't be surprised. I'd be curious to hear what Danny has to say about him versus Javon Solomon. But to me, the reason that you just see a slight discrepancy there is Mo Kamara is kind of the creamed up version, if you will, of Javon Solomon. He's a guy that was playing, in the Pac-12 for Colorado State. Really, I mean, if anybody that watched that, I mean, because it was a Pac-12 at night game, but that Colorado versus Colorado State game, Mo Kamara, I'd argue, was the best player on that team. And he consistently showed a advanced use of his pass rush. He's a guy similar to Javon Solomon, although I'd argue Mo Kamara gets more out of it from that diminished height, that lack of size, where he uses that to his leverage. And he's got good burst off the edge, uses his hands really well, can bend the corner. Another guy where his motor just runs hot and he finds a way to impact plays and get to the quarterback when you think a guy of his stature probably wouldn't. And that's what, to me, ultimately made him, above Javon Solomon, with also that gap of Gabriel Murphy in between.
Danny, any thoughts on Kamara or Murphy?
Yeah, I'll start with Gabriel Murphy. I saw him at the East-West Shrine game. He's a guy that of the Murphy brothers, I think he was probably the better of the pass rushers. But unfortunately, he's 6'2", with 247 pounds and I think 30-inch arms. So I think his future is either going to be moved to a strong side linebacker position or maybe special team. So I think that's his future there. I do like his motor though. Mohamed Kamara, I actually love this kid, and I wanted it so bad to put him on the list, but I couldn't put him and Javon Solomon because another guy that doesn't fit the profile, right? 6'1", 250, sub 33-inch arms, only 32 and 3/8, but a 2-year full-time starter, 49 games, 34 starts, Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year this past year, team captain. This is a guy you put on tape and his tape, and you notice him. And I watched him in 2022 versus Michigan, who had that offensive line there, and he gave them fits. He didn't look like he was outmatched at all. He didn't back down from anybody. Undersized, but he's got a powerful frame, loose hips, solid lateral agility, quick burst, first step, get off the line of scrimmage. This is a guy that can swipe down and dip his shoulder, get underneath the pad level of the offensive lineman and get flat into the quarterback. Makes an impact when he sacks the quarterback. Another one that's just a straight line pass rusher. He does a lot of speed to power, but again, very effective in terms of how he gets to the quarterback. Doesn't look pretty all the time, but he's damn effective. I think this last year he had 13 sacks this year. He's got 29.5 for his career, 45.5 tackles for loss. Again, a guy that can just fire off the snap, and even versus the run. Jonah, I watched him again that game against Michigan, and he's firing off that snap, piercing that gap in between the guard and the tackle, and he's making a play into the backfield. So he's got that motor, that effort, and the production. And I saw him last year against Colorado, where he got kicked out of the game for targeting. That's another guy. He just plays hard, physical toughness, active hands. Another guy that will work to get after the quarterback. So I wanted him. I love this kid. He's a guy a day 3 guy that you could probably bring in and could be one of these guys that you say, oh, how did this guy last to the 5th round? That's Mohamed Kamara. I just couldn't put him and Javon Solomon on the same list, because knowing the fact that these guys do not fit the profile that this staff likes, I thought I could fit in Solomon because of his arm length. I just don't think Kamara would be a guy that this team or this defensive staff would look at.
All right. We will now get back to Jordan's list of the even fronts, and that number we left off at 6. He talked about Cedric Johnson, if I remember correctly, or was I daydreaming that?
We were on Nean, but it's okay. I mean, Cedric Johnson, I'll be very quick.
No, sorry.
No, it's okay. He's a guy that played for Ole Miss. He's I believe 6. Could be wrong on the measurements, but I think he's 6'3", 260. He's a guy that, again, nothing necessarily exceptional about him. What I was actually most impressed by is they'd actually drop him into space, and I thought he acquitted himself quite well in those instances as an even front defender. And not that I think that'd be his role with the Bears, but Eberflus does like to drop defensive linemen from time to time. And outside of that, he's a guy that I think is just you're enticed by the frame, the size, some of his aggressiveness, his burst off the ball, and he generates decent power as well. So that's Cedric Johnson from Ole Miss, and then Brennan Jackson. I don't mean this in a disparaging way, but this is just a guy I call a try hard. He's a guy that isn't necessarily special in any way, but has some production at Washington State. Was a feisty player. Gets off the ball well. Shows decent hand use. Not a bender anyway. Wouldn't even say his power is exceptional well, but he does find a way to make an impact, and I think a lot of that's just from a motor and a willingness to continue to try to get after it. But again, that's where we're at in a weak class, and you're on number 6 or 7 for a specific type of archetype for defensive ends.
Very good. Any comments there, Danny, on Cedric or Brennan?
Yeah, Cedric Johnson is a guy that I really like Jordan said. He's got, at 6'3", 260, 33-inch arms. He's got some traits there, physical traits that you like to work with. A 3-year starter at Ole Miss, a 2023 All SEC selection. So, he led the Rebels in quarterback hurries this past year. So he's got something there you could work with. Again, he's going to be a guy that some defensive lineman's coach is going to say, he's got some tools I can work with. He's probably a draftable kid, probably, day 3, somewhere in that range. So that's Cedric Johnson. Brennan Jackson is a guy that really intrigues me. I put on his tape, and the first thing that catches my eye, I don't know, Jordan, if that caught your eye, he was number 80. I'm like, was this guy ever in before? What the hell is this guy? But no, he was never tight. He was just a guy that, 4-year starter at Washington State, led them with 45 career quarterback pressures, 6'4", 264, doesn't have the length in terms of arm length, only a sub 33-inch arm. So I don't know if he's a fit here, but he's the guy that for me, when I put that tape on, lateral agility, he's got the burst to close. He's another guy that converts speed to power. Another one that's got a motor that continues to run hard, plays hard, will chase down, will pursue all over the field. The biggest thing, he had 8.5 sacks last year, which was his redshirt senior season, which is the most he's had. Does have 3 forced fumbles in his career, which is something you like to see with a defensive lineman, creating some turnovers there. But he's a guy that's had some injury concerns throughout his career, right? 2018 tore his ACL. 2019 broke his foot. So he's a guy that's seemed to have some issues staying healthy and staying on the football field. So, is he draftable? Maybe. I just don't see a guy that's going to be, a starter per se.
Very good. Let's get back to Jordan's list at number 8. He's got Eric Watts out of Connecticut.
Yeah, Eric Watts blew up the combine today in some respect for considering what he was able to do with his size. And he's another guy that you're betting on the traits, the frame, but he's another power rusher. There's not, to be quite frank, if you turn on Connecticut tape, I know that you've obviously got the guard there and you've got Eric Watts, but there's really not a whole lot of pretty to watch with that UConn tape. But Eric Watts is a guy that stood out. As you're at this point when you're looking at this again, this week edge class, you're looking for traits, anything that pops out to you. And Eric Watts is a guy that I think showed some unique athleticism that I think showed up today. And inherently, when you were looking at his kind of rugged, physical, aggressive style, I thought that could lead to a roster spot somewhere in the NFL.
Very good. And at number 9, you've got Miles Cole, who I believe measured at the longest arms in the entire combine that have been measured so far. The guy's got long arms, and he did pretty well today in the drills. What do you think, Jordan?
Yeah, Miles Cole is a guy that I when you're talking again about traits, about frame, this is a guy that I couldn't leave off when you're at the bottom of this, even front top 10 defensive ends. And he's a guy that, when you looked at his teammate, Tyree Wilson last year that went, top 10, I'm not at all claiming that he's the same type of player. But this is a situation where when you can get, even if it's 70% of Tyree Wilson later in the draft, day 3, it's hard not to be interested in at least taking a shot at him because of that frame. He's able to be either a strong side defensive end that, again, just kind of bull in a china shop on tackles, or you move him inside and just watch him completely overwhelm guards and centers at that 3 tech. And again, you saw it test today. He's an explosive athlete for that size. When we talked earlier about archetypes, don't ask the guy that's as big as Miles Cole to be, Von Miller by any stretch of the imagination. But if you're working with a coach that knows how to use him, I think that he's got a tool set that's very intriguing and interesting for an NFL team.
Danny, before we unveil Jordan's number 10, why don't you give me your thoughts on Watts and Cole?
Yeah, it's funny because I don't know if you caught it in the list I gave you there, Aldo, but I gave my top 10. I gave you just missed the list, and just missed it. 3 players were Mo Camaro, Eric Watts, and Miles Cole. So these guys were guys I consider. And again, like Jordan was saying, like we've been saying, at this point of the draft, you're looking at it's a weak class. You're looking at traits, right? And Eric Watts sticks out with his traits at 6'6", 274, 35-plus-inch arms. This is what this staff loves to see. He's a guy I first caught my eye. Again, another guy caught my eye at the Senior Bowl. He's a guy that had I believe 7 sacks this year with at UConn. He's a guy that brings that that size that they love. Athletically, he didn't look as quick as fast on tape as he ran today. So he tested better than what I saw on tape. I saw him play against Tennessee. He looked pretty good in terms of he wasn't overmatched. But yeah, that first step quickness wasn't there. That you want to see in that edge rusher. But he had a 165 10-yard split. So some of the things athletically that I did today didn't really quite match the tape that I looked at. But I do love the fact that he's got the size, got the length. Again, he's a developmental kid. He's a guy you can bring in. He's got a real thin waist, real skinny calves, so doesn't really look the part. A little high cut for me. Plays with his pads elevated, so he loses a lot of leverage battles. But what he does do well is he's a guy that got those long arms, and he's a pretty big guy. Does a good job of getting his hands up and batting down the ball and kind of disrupting that passing window for quarterbacks. So again, we're looking for things here, guys, that you can bring these kids in, whether it's what attributes, whether it's physical, whether it's athletic attributes, that you can come in here and develop these guys. And Eric Watts is one of those guys where I would not be surprised if he does get drafted late day 3, and a guy like that's kind of probably be on your practice squad and a guy that you can develop and get stronger in the weight room. Miles Cole is another guy. Production wasn't there, but the size at 6'6", 278, 36 and 7/8 in terms of arm length. Again, 4'6", 40, 165 10-yard split, a 35-inch vertical. This is a guy that really his tape doesn't match that athletic ability. So was at Louisiana Monroe, I believe it was, for the first 4 years, transferred to Texas Tech. So the production really isn't there, but definitely I got another guy that's probably going to get drafted because of those physical traits. And a defensive line coach is going to say, you know what, I can build this guy up and I can make him into a player.
Excellent. Good stuff. Let's go to Jordan's number 10. This will make J2K happy, I think. It is Zion Tupuola-Fetui, I want to say. Jordan, take it away.
Good enough, Aldo. Yeah, I mean, again, to me, I just think it'd be, I don't want to call it like so ridiculous, but a little bit of a lack of respect if you didn't have ZTF on the board, specifically when you're looking at top 10 defensive ends for the Bears. Again, he's not a player that wow you at this point. He's been in college for a while. He obviously had a devastating Achilles injury that he came back from. But I mean, I don't know how many people remember this, but he was a guy that was talked about with first round hype before that injury. And he's a player that is physical, shows. I mean, they dropped him a bunch. He's kind of that tweener, if you will. But he's a guy that shows a relentlessness in his pass rush. Again, when we're talking about hand usage, I'm not talking about advanced like Latu. That's a different level. But he's a guy that when you're talking about considering who you're drafting, where other guys like Miles Cole are showing you athletic traits, ZTF may not have that, but you're betting on a guy that where he can find a way to stick around is he is ready enough and refined enough that he's never going to carve out a huge big-time role, but enough to stick on a roster as a depth, second, third wave pass rusher or defensive end in a 4-3 scheme. And that's where ZTF, obviously and incredibly well respected by Kalen DeBoer and that Washington staff. And I think that he's a guy somebody will take a flyer on for what he was at one point and the refined player that he is now from spending so much time in college.
Danny?
Yeah, ZTF is, as Jordan likes to call him. I'm not close to him, but I'll use that right now because I don't feel like saying that big long but yeah, he's a guy that to me, he's an outside linebacker, a 3-4 outside linebacker, probably if in his best suited in terms of the next level. But the one thing with this kid is, man, whatever energy drink he drinks before the game, man, that thing has got him juiced up because this guy is twitching and he's fidgety and he's a guy that's got some energy about him. And again, a guy that just plays hard. And is just all over the football field, relentless motor. But again, I don't think he's a hand in the ground or a 4-3 defensive end. I think he's more of an outside, 3-4 outside linebacker, probably more likely a special teams player. So, but again, he's a guy that brings that buzz, that energy you want on a football team. And I would not surprise me to see him, stick on the roster at the next level.
J2K informs us that Zian's dad passed the middle of last season. He still played well and improved. I think there's far more than we've seen. Thanks for that information, J2K. Jordan, you knew that, right?
I did, yeah. I mean, that was a big deal, and obviously, yeah, that was when you really got to hear about Kalen DeBoer speak about the relationship and the meaning that ZTF had on that Washington Huskies team. And to Danny's point, I mean, the guys like this, that's what I'm saying. There's just enough there where he'll find a way to stick on a roster because not only is he refined enough and feisty enough and scrappy enough, those guys kind of can serve as glue guys. There are guys that, you look at other players like, hey, how is he playing as hard as he is? And you're starting above him. You better be outdoing and outputting more effort than what that guy is. And so I think that he will find a way onto a team for what the person he is, how he plays, the refinement he has as an edge rusher.
Very good. Now, you guys have a number of times said, it's no secret, that this is not a great pass rusher draft. And so clearly Ryan Poles is going to have to go into free agency and find some additional pass rush help. Even if he drafts a pass rush in the first round, he's going to need to find somebody else to, get that rotation going the way Eberflus likes. So I asked people in the chat about free agency, and we'll take a look at the Spotrax list of available free agents, but I wanted to get both of your thoughts. But first, let me ask, Ravi is saying, is Darius Smith, who I believe played with the Browns last year, is he a fit potentially for this Bears defense? What do you think, Jordan?
Yeah, I think he can. It's not necessarily, I wouldn't say that that's the best use of Darius Smith. And at this point, he's kind of a mercenary and he's got a little bit of an injury history. He does fit kind of that strong side defensive end, if that's what they're going for, pocket crushers, real nuisance. But to me, we haven't really seen it. I haven't seen Ryan Poles shop for older prospects that are maybe past, a little long in the tooth, past their prime. And that's what Darius Smith looks like to me at this point.
Yeah. Danny, you got thoughts on Smith?
Pass.
I love that.
But yeah, although to your point, I think they have to go, looking at this draft class, I think they will have to go out and address this in free agency. Now, you and I have talked about it in terms of, how much money they've already invested in that defense line with Montez Sweat. They still need a 3 technique, so, maybe money we'll spend will be on a guy like Leonard Williams. We'll see how that happens there. But, you don't have to go shopping for top tier guys, right? They don't have to go for Daniel Hunter. They don't have to go for guys like, Josh Allen, or Josh Allen, the pass rusher, not the quarterback, or Brian Burns, guys like that. That guys that come in top at dog. You don't have to go for those guys. You got to go for a second tier, maybe even third tier guys like Bryce Huff, who the Jets are not going to franchise tag, are not going to sign. He's a guy that's most likely a situational pass rusher, a guy that we've been talking about here, guy that gets that 10 sacks last year on a Jets defensive line that's loaded, a guy that brings that speed, that energy off the edge, guys like that. There are some other guys. I got the list here real quick. We talked about, there's a guy that actually, Jonathan Greenyard from Houston. He's a guy that really came on last year into his own, I should say, with the Texans. And again, a guy I think had 12.5 sacks, if I'm not mistaken there, Jordan. It really came on. So again, another guy who's played in that 4-man front could be someone that could, come in here and at that second tier. I don't expect him, Jonathan Greenyard, to make big money there. So we'll see. If I could be wrong. The cap went up by $30 million for everybody. So we'll see how that goes there. So, but you might also dip into that third tier, right? And a guy that people might cringe and say, no, we don't want that. But just hear me out here. A guy like Leonard Floyd, right? Leonard Floyd, once he's left Chicago, has been a pretty consistent pass rusher, right? Between 8 to 12 sacks from his time with the Rams and a time with the Bills. Leonard Floyd's defensive line coach is now the defensive coordinator here in Chicago, and Eric Washington. So that could be a connection there as well. So, you need a guy that's going to come in and give you consistent pressure. If he gives you 8 or 10 sacks, great. That's what you need. And again, you just want to buy time until you maybe in the next year's draft, you can go ahead and address that as a permanent solution as edge rusher. But a guys like that is what you're trying to look for. You can't go out there and probably spend big money taking on guys like Josh Allen and Brian Burns and Daniel Hunter, because you already paid Montez Sweat. You need that 3 technique still. You might have to go and get that there as well out of free agency. We'll see what happens. But guys like that is what I'm looking for. And I do think they will need to address edge rusher in free agency, because, like I said, Jordan and I have been talking about all night. After those 3 guys, if you don't have any second round picks, that's gonna be hard to get one of those other guys there. So I think it's that 1 pick obviously will be a quarterback, we think, and number 9, if they stay there, it's got to be a receiver. If all the 3 receivers are gone, you get one of those offensive linemen.
Jordan, there's $40 million in additional dollars in the salary cap. Traditionally, it goes up $10 to $20 million. And so maybe Danny is wrong in that perhaps Ryan Poles is going to say, you know what? I am in love with Daniel Hunter. I can get him at a 2-year deal, 3-year deal, and front load the dollars and can you potentially see a big free agent defensive end signing, a Danielle Hunter?
The thing, Aldo, is you absolutely can, but I wouldn't do it. And I certainly don't get the sense that Ryan Poles would be so fiscally irresponsible too. I mean, you see a guy that just gave a boatload of money to Montez Sweat. And the reason I say you can do it is because if you're going to go draft that rookie quarterback, anything's possible. You can add whoever you want. You can load up with Khalil Max and Joey Bosa's and everything else that is available out there. I mean, I think a guy like Joey Bosa, for example, could be available in the cheap for a trade because I do think that, places like the Chargers need to offload some players. But to me, I'm with Danny on this. I'm not looking to shop in the top A+ market here. I'm looking at guys like Jonathan Grenard, I do think he probably will be retained. If I'm Houston, I don't know why the hell I'd let two good. I have just got one defensive end that's solid in Will Anderson, and I got another in Grenard that's developing. Why the hell would I want to split that up? So to me, Bryce Huff is a guy that, we were talking earlier about Chop Robinson. I don't want to spend anything near what Chop Robinson's going to end up getting drafted when I can get a guy that's very similar to him in Bryce Huff. I would have sent a 3rd-round pick to the Jets last year for Bryce Huff. That's how much I think of the guy. So he's much more of a DPR, but I look at guys like, and I know that these are not sexy names, but Shaq Lawson is a decent player that can come in. Leonard Floyd's another one. Some interesting ones that are probably real bottom of the barrel, but James Houston from the Detroit Lions, I know he's a much slimmer, thinner guy, but the production is there. When he plays, he makes an impact on pass rush. So to me, I think I'd be shopping much more in that budget market. And the good news is kind of different from this draft class is you have the flavors that you're looking for. You want speed guys, they're available. James Houston, Bryce Huff. You want powerful kind of brick house guys. You got guys like Yetur Gross-Matos, Shaq Lawson. You want kind of those tweeners. You got guys like Leonard Floyd, Danielle Hunter. So again, I think that there's options, but when we're talking about guys like Josh Allen and certain players like that, I don't think they make it out of their teams. Good edges are too valuable. You don't watch them go. Unless you're a team like the Jets where you have so many that you have to let a guy like Huff walk. And to me, I think if we're talking about if I had one guy, I'm with Danny on this whole point tonight is I'd like to see them have a speed rusher. I just don't think that that's what they're after. We've not seen them try to go get a guy like that unless it was Yannick Ngakoue. And the last time they did, it kind of burned them. So I'm not sure that they'd want to go again after that.
Interesting. And I got to give it to J2K. He is slamming his fist on the table. He says, we've got the money. Why not go after a big-time signing and get a championship defense in this year? Sign Danielle Hunter. And then he adds, sign Julian Blackmon at the free safety position. He does make a good case here. I think if you've got the money this year, maybe you make a run at making the playoffs and going deep into the playoffs by signing some talent on short-term deals.
I mean, if you're going to go big, why don't you go for younger guys like Brian Burns at 26 and and Josh Allen, which I don't believe that the Jaguars are gonna franchise them. We'll see, but go after those big ticket rather than Hunter's 29. He's had a pretty good career in Minnesota, but it's for me. I'd rather go for the younger guys, and another guy, AJ Espinoza. He's a guy that's another free agent from Buffalo that more of a power rusher, but again, another young guy, 25 years old. Eric Washington's here. He knows him. I just have a feeling like one of those guys, whether it's Floyd or Espinoza, are going to end up in Chicago some way or one way or another, because you also have to go get another defensive tackle as well. And Leonard Williams, the guy from Seattle, is a guy that I've kind of caught my eye on there and see what they do there with him.
Yeah, I mean, real quick, Aldo, you've got 3 different tackles, and this is what Danny's really alluding to, is Eric Washington coming over. That Buffalo defensive line got all basically ransacked. They're all hitting free agency this year. You've got Shaq Lawson, who's played some time with Buffalo. You've got Leonard Floyd, who's now played a year with Buffalo. You've got Epinesa, who's got a year with Buffalo. And then even a guy like Tyquan Lewis, who came from the Colts. That's a guy that Eberflus knows, who's hit the market. So to the point that I think Danny and I are talking about, you're going to see a situation where these B-level, C-level markets where I just imagine Ryan Poles going to say, let me take a few dart throws at a couple defensive ends in case I want to just go use that number 9 or 10 or whatever pick for a receiver. And then by the time I come back in round 3, I'm not going to have many edges. So maybe I'll take a late round swing on like a Miles Cole or something, but I'm just going to fill up on B, C level free agents.
Yeah, my thing is, and let me know if you guys think this is accurate. I'm way off the wall here, but the unit that's closer in terms of being complete, right? I'd say it's defense, correct? So go spend the free agent money to put your defense over the top, right? Resign Jalen Johnson, bring in an edge guy, bring in a defensive interior defensive lineman. Now use your draft capital to help build that young offense and build it around your young quarterback. Okay, whether it's a receiver at number 9, this is a deep draft in terms of interior offensive lineman. Get an interior offensive lineman in the 3rd round. If you don't get a second round pick or whatever, build and get another receiver later on in the draft. Build your offense through the draft and build your defense that it's ready to go, ready to compete now with veteran free agents.
J2K is wondering, where else are we going to spend our cap space on? Well, you got to allocate 15 to 20 million off the cap for the re-signing of Jalen Johnson, and you've got to spend some money potentially on an offensive lineman as well. So if you're going to make a run at a championship and you're going to draft a young quarterback, you certainly want to do the most that you can to protect that quarterback. So I would consider signing a big ticket. And Swanky was talking about this earlier, that he would put a higher priority on improving the offensive line than on finding a pass rusher in the draft.
You could do that through the draft, though. The draft is deep in offensive linemen, so that's why you attack the offense via the draft to grow with your young quarterback, and then free agent money, you go and kind of solidify your defense in other spots, whether it's the free safety and Blackman, like what's one guy that J2K mentioned, the guy I brought up before that I like, an edge guy, an interior defensive lineman, and solidify the defensive line with free agent money, and just fortify your offense with and especially like receiver is a deep class this year, interior offensive line in general is a deep class this year. Fortify that with the draft capital you have.
Great stuff, guys. And one final point is, it looks like we're not going to trade the number 1 pick. The Bears only have 6 picks. Now, they have the most value points if you use the Rich Hill draft chart model. They've got 1,513 points with only those 6 picks, and that's primarily because they got a 1 and the 9th, the 1st and the 9th of the 1st round. But I was, I'm still in the camp of building around Justin Fields, giving him the weapons and seeing him improve. But if that's not going to be the case, now you've only got 6 draft picks unless you trade that 9th pick down to accumulate more draft capital. And I'm not sure I like that idea. I like the idea. I'd give up my 2nd round pick for the 9th pick in the 1st round. I mean, that 9th pick of the 1st round is our 2nd rounder, and it is valuable. It is super valuable. So I don't think there's going to be much in terms of draft assets for the Bears with only with only 6 picks. Your thoughts?
Well, what the hope is and again, I'm on the same camp with you, Aldo, is keeping Justin, building around Justin, but I think that ship has sailed, unfortunately. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But if that 9th pick, what your hope is one of these quarterback needy teams is desperate enough, whether it's Oakland at 13, whether it's Denver at 12, Minnesota, I believe at 11, that sees a quarterback, maybe Jordan's quarterback, JJ McCarthy, sitting out there, and they say, all right, we want to go get him. And then that's where Ryan Poles can then strike a deal where he drops down to that mid, early, first half of the 1st round, and he recoups that 2nd round pick, maybe even more, to add to some of that. I mean, we've seen Ryan Poles work in his 2 draft classes. He comes out with, that first one, I think only had 6 picks, came out with 12 of them or something like that, 12 or 13 picks in that first draft. And then, last year, I think did the same thing, kind of wheeled and dealed and gained some more picks as well. So I don't think they're going to come out with 6 picks. I think they'll come out with more than 6 picks, but I think that number 9 pick is where he can play with it, because again, depending on what they're targeting, whether it's a receiver, whether it's an edge guy, where there's an offensive lineman, right? So if one of those quarterback needy teams are desperate enough to come up and give you something good, I think I can see him trading down from that and then recouping some more picks there.
Jordan, any final thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I think Danny really hit it to me. If you're Ryan Poles, the best thing that could happen to you is, well, one, I mean, I may differ from you gentlemen a little bit. I think that I'm hoping that I can get a few teams in on the bid for Justin Fields, and I'm hoping I can basically call Montez Sweat free when I get a 2nd round pick for Justin Fields. That would be ideal. But as far as, what you can leverage, I'm kind of with Danny now. I said if I had to take one defensive end at 9, it would be Jared Verse, but I'm much more in Danny in the sense that these guys all belong in that 15, 16, 17 pick range. So what you're really hoping for is that you're wishing and hoping that I can start a bidding war with Minnesota, Vegas, and who's that? Who's the 10th team? You have Denver. Thank you. Yeah, it's Denver, Minnesota, and then Vegas. Or if I can get one of them to go, hey, and it could be McCarthy, it could be Knicks. I mean, everybody's got their own flavor. But if I can get one of them to jump up, that's really a good way to go. Because, they're inherently, they all need one, and they're not going to be a lot of answers. I mean, really, if you're looking at free agency, maybe it's Kirk Cousins, maybe it's Jacoby Brissett, it's Justin Fields. There's really not a ton. So there's no way that I see the Raiders, the Broncos, and the Vikings filling all those needs. So you're hoping that you can get those two of those teams to play against each other and go, well, I have to jump up to 9 because if I don't, you're going to snag my quarterback.
Great stuff, gentlemen. Jordan, we usually have our guest on for 30 to 60 minutes. We've doubled up on your time. You've been very generous with it. Totally appreciate it. And your top-notch evaluation. I love it when you and Danny disagree. I'm typically the type of guy that brings the family together, but on draft shows, I want to see debates. And you guys brought it today. So thank you very much, Jordan.
Thank you so much. Aldo, Danny, I very much appreciate it. You two gentlemen are wonderful and very gracious with your time. And thank you so much for the opportunity. Glad to talk shop.
You got it. Danny, any final words before we pull the plug on this edition of Draft on Tap?
No, just getting back to the tape. Next week, we'll have another position group we're going to break down for you. And then, going back to the combine and see what happens. Obviously, Saturday's a big day with the quarterbacks. I know Caleb is not going to be throwing neither with Jaden Daniels nor Drake May, but McCarthy will be out there throwing. Michael Penix will be out there throwing, and Bonix will be out there throwing. So we'll see what happens there. But we talked about drawing interest in that number 9 pick. That's the way to do it. If these quarterbacks go out there and have pretty good days in terms of throwing, that helps only going to help the Bears and generate some interest in some of the other teams. Hopefully trading up and offering them that second round pick or more to trade up. So we'll see what happens.
Great, gentlemen. Thank you very much. It's Baseball Talk tomorrow afternoon with Vinny Parisi and Joe Mandel. And then tomorrow night, it is the Willis Twin Towers podcast. They'll take you through more of the combine stuff. And it's a great show to interact with those guys and get some conversations going. So I hope you will join them live here on our YouTube channel. That is it for this edition of Draft on Tap. My name is Aldo Gandia for Danny Shimon and Jordan Silvera. Good night, everybody.